The accidental engagement. Marcus Jenkins had never imagined that a simple translation error would lead to an interstellar incident. As a linguistics specialist for the United Earth Diplomatic Corps, he'd handled plenty of delicate communications with various alien civilizations since humanity joined the Galactic Assembly 3 years ago. None of those experiences had prepared him for his current predicament. "You did what?" Director Olivia Hammond's voice cracked as she stared at Marcus across her sleek obsidian desk. Marcus tugged at his collar, sweat beading on his forehead despite the office's climate control. "I was translating during the video conference with the Zetherian High Command. There was a section of Admiral Nixra's greeting that the auto-translator flagged as potentially ceremonial. I decided to respond with what I thought was the appropriate cultural acknowledgement." Hammond's eyes narrowed. "And instead, you accidentally proposed marriage to the Supreme Fleet Commander of the Zetherian Empire. Technically, it's more like a binding life oath that includes elements of both marriage and a military alliance," Marcus clarified, immediately regretting his pedantry when he saw Hammond's expression darken. "Is there any way to explain this was a misunderstanding?" Hammond asked, her tone shifting from anger to desperate hope. Marcus grimaced. "That's the problem. I tried. But in Zetherian culture, claiming a misunderstanding after offering the oath of eternal binding is considered the highest form of dishonor. It's like saying you deliberately misled them just to see their reaction. It would be interpreted as Earth deliberately insulting their highest military officer." Hammond collapsed back into her chair. "And the alternative?" "I go through with it, apparently," Marcus said quietly. "At least until we can find a diplomatic solution that doesn't trigger an interstellar incident." The meeting was interrupted by a junior analyst bursting into the office without knocking. "Director. We've got multiple unidentified vessels entering Earth orbit. Massive energy signatures, nothing like we've seen before." Hammond's face went pale. "How many?" 73 at last count. "They're forming a pattern over Northern Europe." Marcus felt his stomach drop. That would be the 7th Fleet of the Zetherian Empire. Admiral Nixra's personal armada. "She works fast," Hammond muttered. "The conference call was only yesterday." Marcus pulled out his tablet and brought up the latest satellite imagery. The Zetherian vessels were unlike anything humanity had encountered before, massive crystalline structures that seemed to fold in on themselves in geometrically impossible ways. They didn't resemble traditional spacecraft so much as floating cathedrals made of light and shadow. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies," the analyst reported. "They're requesting to speak with, Earth diplomat Marcus Jenkins, promised one to the great Admiral Nixra, light of the 7 systems." Hammond shot Marcus a look that could have melted steel. "Promised one. I may have accidentally accepted a title during the translation," Marcus admitted. Within the hour, Marcus found himself in the UEDC's main communication center, surrounded by military personnel, diplomats, and a very nervous-looking team of xenobiologists. The massive display screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Nixra in all her imposing glory. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent blue-green skin and a crown of crystalline spines that caught the light like prisms, Nixra was as beautiful as she was terrifying. Her uniform, if it could be called that, appeared to be partly grown from her own body, a seamless blend of technology and biology that human science couldn't begin to comprehend. "Marcus Jenkins of Earth," her voice resonated through the chamber, perfectly translated but still carrying harmonics that made everyone's skin tingle. "I come to honor our binding. The preparations have begun." Marcus stepped forward, acutely aware that the fate of Earth might depend on his next words. "Admiral Nixra, I am honored by your prompt arrival. However, I fear there may be a matter requiring clarification regarding our arrangement." Nixra's expression didn't change, but the lights along her spinal crown flashed in what Marcus recognized as surprise. "Clarification? The oath of eternal binding requires no clarification. It is absolute." "Of course," Marcus backpedaled quickly. "I meant clarification regarding Earth customs. Our people have certain, prerequisites before such bindings can be formalized. A dangerous pause followed. The analysts around Marcus were frantically typing notes, likely running predictive models for potential Zetherian responses. Hammond, standing just behind him, whispered, "Keep going. We need time." "What prerequisites?" Nyxera finally asked, her head tilting slightly. Marcus thought frantically. On Earth, before a binding of such significance, the parties must demonstrate compatibility through a series of challenges and shared experiences. It's our way of honoring the seriousness of the commitment. The lights on Nyxera's crown rippled in what the xenobiologists had previously identified as amusement or interest. These challenges, they test strength, strategic thinking, dominance. Among other things, Marcus replied carefully. They test compatibility on multiple levels: intellectual, philosophical, practical. Nyxera seemed to consider this for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, revealing rows of perfectly translucent teeth that looked sharp enough to cut diamond. Earth customs are intriguing. I shall participate in these challenges. Prepare yourself, Marcus Jenkins. I will descend to your location in 6 Earth hours to begin these compatibility tests personally. The screen went dark before Marcus could respond. 6 hours, Hammond said flatly. You have 6 hours to come up with compatibility tests that won't offend the most powerful military commander in this sector of the galaxy. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. We need to get the cultural team working on this immediately. And maybe alert whatever passes for planetary defense these days. Hammond was already making calls. The Security Council is assembling now. This is officially an international incident. The next few hours passed in a blur of emergency meetings, frantic research into Zetherian cultural practices, and increasingly panicked calls from various world leaders. Marcus found himself in the uncomfortable position of being both the cause of the crisis and the only person who might be able to resolve it. By hour 5, Marcus had returned to his apartment, a modest unit in the diplomatic housing complex in Geneva, to prepare for Nyxera's arrival. The diplomatic corps had decided that meeting in an official capacity might escalate the situation. A personal setting might help emphasize the personal nature of the commitment he had allegedly made. His apartment had been hastily transformed. Security systems installed, cultural advisors on standby via discreet earpieces, and a small team monitoring everything from a command post established in the apartment below his. Marcus stood at his window, watching the darkening sky. One of the Zetherian vessels had broken formation and was now descending toward Earth, toward him. His communication device chimed. She's almost here, Hammond's voice came through. Remember, your job is to stall. Find a peaceful way to disentangle yourself from this relationship without triggering an interstellar incident. No pressure, Marcus muttered. A blinding light flashed outside his window, and a perfect circle of grass in the complex's shared garden was suddenly scorched into geometric patterns. From the center of this circle, a beam of light shot upward, and within it, the unmistakable figure of Admiral Nyxera materialized. Marcus took a deep breath and opened his front door. As Nyxera approached, he could see she had changed from her military regalia into something more ceremonial, flowing garments that seemed to be made of living light, changing color with her movements. Marcus Jenkins, she announced, her voice carrying across the courtyard. I have arrived to begin our compatibility testing, as your Earth customs require. Every light in the diplomatic complex flickered as she spoke. Behind her, a procession of smaller Zetherians appeared, each carrying what looked like ceremonial objects. I look forward to proving that our binding is fated, Nyxera continued, now standing directly before him. My fleet will remain in orbit until the process is complete. Marcus swallowed hard. Admiral Nyxera, welcome to Earth. I look forward to beginning our compatibility tests. Her smile was dazzling and terrifying all at once. Excellent. Should you fail to find us compatible, of course, Zetherian custom would require me to destroy this settlement as compensation for the dishonor. But I'm certain it won't come to that. As Nixera and her entourage entered his modest apartment, Marcus sent a desperate glance toward the hidden camera he knew was monitoring the situation. Breaking off this accidental engagement had just become a matter of planetary survival. Cosmic negotiations. Marcus's apartment had never felt smaller than when filled with 7-foot-tall Zetherians. Admiral Nixera moved with surprising grace for someone of her stature, examining his modest possessions with genuine curiosity while her 4 attendants arranged ceremonial objects throughout the living space. "Your dwelling is compact," Nixera observed, running a 6-fingered hand along his bookshelf. "Yet efficiently arranged. This pleases me." Marcus watched nervously as one attendant placed a pulsating crystal orb on his coffee table. "I'm glad you find it acceptable. In our culture, we begin compatibility testing with conversation. Getting to know one another." Nixera's crown spines flashed with bright patterns. "An unusual approach. In Zetherian tradition, compatibility is determined through trials of combat and strategic challenges." She settled herself on his sofa, which creaked ominously under her weight. "But I am adaptable. Proceed with your conversational assessment." The earpiece hidden in Marcus's ear crackled. "Keep her talking," Hammond whispered. "Our analysts need time to process the energy readings from those objects they're placing." Marcus cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could start with why you were interested in accepting my accidental proposal. Surely a military leader of your standing has many potential partners among your own people." Nixera's expression shifted subtly, and Marcus worried he'd committed another cultural faux pas. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a resonant whisper. "Your diplomatic corps believes this binding was accidental, do they not?" Marcus froze. Well. "Your translation was flawless," Nixera continued, surprising him. "I reviewed the communication records. You spoke the oath of binding with perfect pronunciation and proper ceremonial inflection. This was no accident." The hidden earpiece erupted with frantic chatter that Marcus struggled to ignore. "Admiral, I assure you." "No more deceptions," Nixera interrupted, raising a hand. The crystal orb on the table pulsed in response, bathing the room in a soft blue light. "Your linguistic database contains comprehensive information on Zetherian ceremonial language. The probability of accidental proper usage is astronomically low. You chose the oath of binding deliberately." Marcus's mind raced. This was worse than he thought. She believed their connection was intentional, perhaps even part of some human strategy. "Admiral, there's been a misunderstanding," he began carefully. "I know why you did it," she continued, shocking him into silence. "And I approved. It was tactically brilliant." "It was?" Marcus managed. Nixera smiled, revealing those translucent teeth again. "The political landscape within the Zetherian Empire is complex. My position as admiral is being challenged by rival factions. An alliance with an emerging power, even one as technologically primitive as Earth, changes the equation." One of her attendants approached, presenting a holographic display that hovered between them. It showed star charts and military formations that Marcus couldn't begin to interpret. "High Commander Vexus leads the opposition," Nixera explained. "He controls 3 fleets and has been advocating for the conquest rather than incorporation of emerging civilizations. Including yours." The implications hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. "So my accidental proposal created a binding protection agreement that prevents Vexus from legally attacking Earth," Nixera finished. "As my bound partner, your world falls under my direct protection. A most convenient coincidence, if it were truly a coincidence." In his ear, Hammond was practically shouting. "She's using you for political leverage. This could be an opportunity." Marcus took a deep breath. "Admiral, I must be honest with you. The proposal was indeed accidental, a misinterpretation of cultural protocols." Before she could respond, he quickly added, "However, now that I understand the strategic implications, perhaps we can negotiate a more formal alliance that serves both our interests without requiring a personal binding. The crystal orb pulsed more intensely, and Nixera's attendants exchanged concerned glances. Retraction of the oath is dishonor, Nixera stated flatly. Dishonor requires compensation through destruction. These are our ways. Unless, Marcus countered, thinking rapidly, there is a greater honor to replace it. In Earth cultures, we have a concept called diplomatic immunity, which supersedes personal obligations when greater matters of state are involved. Nixera tilted her head, her crown spines shifting to a questioning pattern. Explain. Instead of a personal binding between us, what if Earth offered a formal military alliance with the Zetherian Empire, specifically with your faction? That would provide you with greater political advantage than a mere personal connection to a single human, while respecting both our cultures. For several tense moments, Nixera was silent, her crystal crown pulsing with complex patterns that the xenobiologists would probably spend months analyzing. Finally, she spoke. An intriguing alternative. But such an arrangement would require significant demonstrations of Earth's value as an ally. Marcus nodded. Of course. We could begin discussions immediately about technological exchange, strategic positioning. A deafening boom interrupted him as the windows of his apartment rattled. Outside, the sky lit up with brilliant flashes. It appears negotiations will need to accelerate, Nixera announced calmly, rising to her feet. That would be Commander Vexus arriving in orbit. Earlier than anticipated. Marcus rushed to the window. Above the city, massive shapes were materializing, Zetherian vessels even larger than Nixera's, their crystalline structures glowing with ominous red energy. He dares to challenge my claim. Nixera hissed, her composure momentarily broken. What's happening? Marcus demanded. Vexus has declared a right of contested binding, one of the attendants explained, frantically manipulating a holographic control panel. He claims your proposal was invalid and seeks to nullify the protection it provides. In practical terms, Nixera added, he intends to destroy this settlement as a demonstration that Earth is unworthy of alliance. Marcus's earpiece exploded with panic from the command center. Military alerts were blaring across the city. In the distance, he could see emergency vehicles already mobilizing. We need to stop this, Marcus said urgently. How do we prevent an attack? Nixera's eyes locked with his. The right of contested binding can only be resolved through formal challenge. Vexus against me, or against you as my chosen representative. Me. Marcus's voice cracked. Fight as Zetherian commander. Not physical combat, Nixera clarified. A challenge of minds. Strategy. Diplomacy. The very skills for which you humans are beginning to gain reputation in the Galactic Assembly. Another explosion rocked the building. This one closer. We're out of time for debate, Hammond's voice came through the earpiece. Intelligence suggests those ships are targeting command centers. Your building could be next. Marcus made his decision. I accept the challenge as your representative. What must I do? Nixera's crown flashed with what might have been approval. She gestured to her attendants, who quickly gathered around the crystal orb on the coffee table. The orb expanded, projecting a complex three-dimensional interface into the air. This is a thought arena, Nixera explained. Vexus will project his strategic challenge. You must counter with superior reasoning and diplomatic insight. The Galactic Assembly AI will judge the outcome. And if I win? Vexus must withdraw and acknowledge our binding, or alliance, as you have proposed, Nixera said. If you lose. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The explosions outside made the consequences clear enough. The holographic projection stabilized, revealing the stern face of Commander Vexus, a Zetherian with blood-red crown spines and battle scars across his face. This is the human you would bind yourself to, Nixera, his voice boomed through the projection. This soft creature from a water world. This diplomat who outmaneuvered you strategically, Nixera countered smoothly. He has accepted the right of challenge. Vexus's eyes narrowed. Very well. The challenge is set, demonstrate why humanity deserves alliance rather than subjugation. You have one planetary rotation to present your case in the thought arena. The projection shifted, transforming into a complex simulation of galactic politics, resource distributions, and military strengths, a multidimensional chess game with civilization-ending stakes. Marcus studied the projection intently. His background in linguistics and diplomacy hadn't prepared him for strategic military thinking on a galactic scale. But as he observed the patterns, he began to recognize something familiar. This isn't just about military strength, he murmured. It's about communication networks. Information flow. Nixura glanced at him sharply. Few outsiders recognize that aspect of Zetherian strategy. Marcus stepped forward, his hands moving through the holographic display. Earth's position in the galactic arm might seem strategically insignificant from a purely military perspective. But our planet sits at the intersection of 7 major communication channels between different civilizations. He manipulated the display, highlighting routes that even Nixura seemed surprised to see visualized together. Humanity's diplomatic efforts have established translation protocols with 17 different species in just 3 years. We're not valuable as a military asset, we're valuable as cultural interpreters. Communication specialists. The simulation rippled, absorbing his input. Outside, the bombardment had paused, suggesting Vexus was observing the challenge. A civilization doesn't need to be conquered if it can be understood, Marcus continued, gaining confidence. The Zetherian Empire faces challenges not from external threats but from internal fracturing, different factions unable to communicate effectively across cultural divides that have developed over millennia of expansion. Vexus's voice cut through the projection. Pretty words from a species barely able to maintain peace on its own world. Yet we've learned from our failures, Marcus countered. Earth's history is a lesson in the consequences of failed communication and the benefits of successful diplomacy. We offer that experience to the Zetherian Empire, not as subjects, but as allies specializing in what you most need. The holographic simulation pulsed, assimilating his argument. Complex algorithms ran visibly through the projection as the Galactic Assembly AI processed the challenge. Minutes stretched into an hour. Outside, both fleets remained in holding patterns. Finally, the crystal orb flashed with a definitive pattern. The challenge is resolved, Nixura announced, reading the Zetherian symbols materializing in the air. The Galactic Assembly recognizes the strategic value of the human argument. The alliance stands. Through the projection, Vexus's expression darkened. This is not over, Nixura. It is for now, Commander, she replied calmly. Withdraw your fleet as the right demands. With visible reluctance, Vexus cut the communication. Outside, the red-tinged vessels began moving away from Earth's orbit. Marcus collapsed onto a chair, adrenaline draining from his system. Did we just prevent an interstellar war? For now, Nixura confirmed. And established a precedent for human-Zetherian relations that will be difficult for even Vexus to challenge. She turned to her attendants. Prepare for departure. We have much to coordinate. You're leaving? Marcus asked, surprised. Nixura's crown flashed with what he now recognized as amusement. Our personal binding has been successfully renegotiated into a formal alliance, as you suggested. My presence is required to solidify political support among my faction. So no marriage? Marcus clarified. No traditional binding, she agreed. Though as official diplomatic liaison between our species, we will be working quite closely together. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. The oath of binding takes many forms, Marcus Jenkins. This is merely a more practical interpretation. Within the hour, Nixura and her attendants had departed, leaving behind only the crystal orb, a direct communication channel, she had explained, and a thoroughly relieved diplomatic corps. Director Hammond stood in Marcus's living room, surveying the scorched patterns on his carpet where the Zetherians had performed their ceremonial departure. Congratulations, Jenkins, she said dryly. You've been promoted to Interspecies Alliance Coordinator. Your first assignment is to establish proper diplomatic protocols with the Zetherian Empire, ones that preferably don't involve accidental marriage proposals. Marcus stared at the crystal orb, which occasionally pulsed with what seemed like distant thoughts. Do you think she knew all along? That my proposal wasn't intentional? Hammond shrugged. Does it matter? You turned a potential catastrophe into the most significant diplomatic breakthrough since first contact. She headed for the door, pausing briefly. By the way, your request for a larger apartment has been approved. Somewhere with space for 7-foot aliens. As Hammond left, Marcus examined the star charts Nyxera had left behind. Somewhere out there, her fleet was protecting Earth from Vexus and his faction, while simultaneously strengthening her political position. He'd tried to break off an accidental engagement and ended up forging an interstellar alliance instead. The crystal orb pulsed with a pattern he was beginning to recognize as Nyxera's particular signature. Marcus smiled. Diplomatic relations with the Zetherians were going to be complicated, fascinating, and anything but boring. Sometimes the most profound connections began with the most spectacular misunderstandings.